Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to discuss freedom and what makes it possible. Most people put communism and socialism on the far left, Nazism and fascism at the far right. But why? What's the criteria? They never tell you. I prefer to look at it in terms of government power, with zero power on the far right and total power on the far left. With zero power, government's too small. The people abuse each other. You can't even enforce the laws. When the government's too large, you have tyranny where the government abuses the people. Communism, socialism, Nazism, and fascism all properly belong at the far left. They are totalitarian governments. Liberty only exists between anarchy and tyranny. Government must be strong enough to prevent anarchy and strictly limited in power to prevent tyranny. This is what a republic is. It is tough on crime, and it requires limited government. Our Constitution was designed to preserve freedom and to make freedom possible. One of the most destructive things government can do is engage in tyranny with overregulation, taxation, and the like, while simultaneously being soft on crime. This destroys freedom from both ends. There's something known as personal anarchy, where a person abuses themselves. Drugs, alcohol, porn, prostitution, so-called victimless crimes all fall into this category. It is self-evident that those who will not govern themselves cannot be trusted with self-government. Personal anarchy is a real threat to liberty. People need to control themselves. So what is the proper role of government? All government activities fall into one of four categories. Things that only government should do. This includes national defense, law enforcement, the judicial system, foreign relations, and immigration, just to name a few. Secondly, there are things that government does better than the private sector. Roads, highways, canals, building up the infrastructure. Natural monopolies. If governments don't own the natural monopolies, like gas companies and electric companies, they need to regulate them. Nobody wants competition, which would require 20 sets of gas lines and 15 sets of power lines going through your neighborhood. It's more efficient to have one supplier. Then we have standards of weights and measures. Most people would probably put that in things that only government can do. But there are private standards organizations, many of them, but that is a proper government function. Thirdly, the third category is things the private sector does better. Food production, manufacturing, distribution, education, and charities. Governments do a very poor job with agriculture. They don't manufacture anything worth a darn. They can't run a manufacturing company. They used to do a good job with education for 100 years. But we'll come to that later. And charities? Private charities do far better than government. Things only the private sector should do. Religion, the press, healthcare, anything with a high potential for abuse. So there's the four categories: things that only the government can do, things the government does better, the things the private sector does better, and things only the private sector should do. The purpose of government is to protect the rights of the people. With education, private school test scores are higher than the public schools. They also cost less per student, and government schools have a habit of becoming vehicles of indoctrination. And the parents have little choice but to leave their kids there. Thomas Jefferson said, "Those who expect to be ignorant and free expect that which never was and never will be." When a people don't understand the basic principles that allow freedom to exist, their education system is a threat to freedom. Abe Lincoln said those principles taught in the classroom in one generation become public policy in the next. If government controls the schools, they control the minds of the next generation. Government schools and self-determination are mutually exclusive. You can't have both. With government charities, they don't end poverty, they just make people comfortable in their poverty. They create dependency. They become tools for manipulating voters. They are used to reward some groups and punish others. They create a sense of entitlement, destroying gratitude. and it diverts revenue from private charities that actually do some good. Our founding fathers wanted freedom. They yearned for liberty. America declared independence from England because we wanted our freedom. Can one be both dependent and independent? Not likely. Is it possible for people to be both dependent and free? No, it's never happened. With private charities, they find and eliminate the root cause of a person's condition. It creates self-reliance. It's liberating, cost-effective. It creates gratitude, and ends of poverty. Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution states, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives. The words herein granted teach us that the powers of Congress are granted by whom? We the people. If we were to eliminate those two words, it would dramatically change the meaning of the paragraph. It would mean they had unlimited power. They don't. The 10th Amendment says those powers not delegated to the states, to the United States by the Constitution. The 10th Amendment says those powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. There's that word again, delegated. We learn from this that all government authority is delegated by the people to the government. Is it possible to delegate authority you do not have? No. No man has the right to take money and give it from one person and give it to another by force. That's called stealing. And therefore we can't delegate that authority to the government. We don't have it to give. Since all government power is delegated from the people to the government, is it possible to empower the people by empowering government? It is not. It deprives us of power. If you have a problem with a company, you can take your business elsewhere. You complain to the government, file a lawsuit, hire a lawyer, whatever it takes. If you have a problem with a government agency, you can hope for the best, depend on lousy service, high prices, and deaf ears. They will ignore you. This is why Thomas Jefferson said that government which governs least governs best. The powers of Congress are enumerated in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. They have power to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce, to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and bankruptcies, to coin money, standard of weights and measures, to establish post offices and post roads, to protect intellectual property, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to declare war, to raise and support armies and navies. All the powers of Congress enumerated in the United States Constitution fall into the first two categories. The government's the only one that can do it, or the government does it better than the private sector. The Constitution can be amended. It's difficult. It takes 66% of both the House and the Senate, 3/4 of the states to ratify. That's a high bar. It's only been done a couple dozen times since the beginning, 200 years ago. Or you can call a constitutional convention. Get 66% of the states to call the convention and 75% to ratify the proposed changes. That's never been done. It's very difficult to amend the Constitution. Or, are you ready for this? 5 men in black dresses. All it takes is a simple majority of the Supreme Court. Abe Lincoln used to have a question that he had asked. I called it Abe's IQ test. Abe Lincoln used to have Abe Lincoln used to ask a question. If you call a dog's tail a leg, how many legs would a dog have? Calling a tail a leg. Abe Lincoln used to ask a question. If you call a dog's tail a leg, how many legs would a dog have? Some brain surgeon would always say 5. You say, nope, calling a tail a leg doesn't make it one. And calling a Supreme Court ruling a part of the Constitution doesn't make it so. The goals of the Constitution are contained in the preamble. Number 1, it begins with saying, we the people of the United States. First goal, in order to form a more perfect union. The Articles of Confederation were not working. They needed something that worked better. Establish justice. Notice it doesn't say establish fairness, this says establish justice. Ensure domestic tranquility. Can you think of anything that shatters domestic tranquility faster than threatening to redistribute wealth? You have half the people saying, yeah, I want their money, and the other half goes, I'm going to quit working if that's what it takes. They're not taking my money. Provide for the common defense. That means we pay for it. Promote the general welfare. You know, it doesn't say provide the general welfare, it just says promote the general welfare. General welfare are those things that help everybody. What we have today is specific welfare, where we harm one group of people by taking money from them, and we harm a second group of people by making them dependent on that money. And then to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. They wanted us to be free in perpetuity. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. An early American religious leader and mayor of a large city was asked how he governed so many people. His response, I teach them correct principles and they govern themselves. The cost of liberty is eternal vigilance. It's time for a little repair. We need to keep government in the tolerance zone, and we need to teach them these correct principles. Your friends and neighbors, your children. Teach them these correct principles so that we will remain free.